Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. The morning sun painted the Pacific waters in shades of gold and amber as Jake Riley cast his line from the deck of his weathered fishing boat, the Sea Runner. 23 years he'd been working these waters off the California coast, and he could read the ocean like his grandfather's old leather-bound Bible. Today felt different, though. The fish weren't biting, and his sonar kept picking up strange readings from the deep. Jake adjusted his worn baseball cap and checked the equipment again. The depth finder showed something massive moving far below, something too big and too organized to be a school of fish. At first he'd assumed it was a whale pod, but whales didn't move in perfect geometric formations. "Come on, old girl," he muttered to his boat, patting the console affectionately. "Don't start acting up on me now." The sonar screen flickered, displaying readings that made no sense. Objects the size of buildings were rising from the ocean floor nearly 3 miles down. Jake had heard stories from other fishermen about strange lights in the deep water, unexplained phenomena that the Coast Guard always dismissed as equipment malfunctions or overactive imaginations. A brilliant flash erupted beneath the surface, visible even through the deep blue water. Jake's radio crackled with static, and his compass spun wildly before settling on magnetic north again. Something was definitely wrong. That's when he saw her. At first, it looked like debris floating in the distance, maybe wreckage from a boat accident. Jake's instincts kicked in. 23 years on the water had taught him that the ocean didn't forgive hesitation. He fired up the engine and headed toward what he now recognized as a person in the water. As he drew closer, Jake realized this was no ordinary drowning victim. The figure wore what appeared to be a form-fitting suit that shimmered with an iridescent quality, like oil on water. Elaborate fins extended from her arms and legs, though they seemed to be retracting as he watched. Most startling of all, she appeared to be breathing underwater, though she was clearly in distress. Jake cut the engine and threw out a life preserver. "Grab on!" he shouted, though he doubted she could hear him. The woman looked up, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. Her features were unmistakably human, but her eyes held an otherworldly quality, large, luminous, and filled with intelligence that seemed ancient beyond her apparent age. Strange symbols glowed faintly along her temples before fading. She reached for the life preserver with movements that seemed too graceful for someone who should be drowning. As Jake hauled her aboard, he noticed that her skin had a subtle blue-green tint, and what he'd initially mistaken for a wetsuit appeared to be her natural skin. "Thank you," she gasped, speaking perfect English with an accent he couldn't place. "I am Princess Lyra of the Nereid people. You must listen carefully. Your world is in terrible danger." Jake stared at her, his practical fisherman's mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The woman, Lyra, was clearly not entirely human, yet she spoke his language and claimed to be royalty. Her urgent tone and the genuine fear in her eyes convinced him to listen rather than question his sanity. "I don't know what you are," Jake said slowly, "but you're hurt and scared. That's enough for me. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. Galactic Nova Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. Okay, it's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you." Lyra's expression softened with something Jake recognized as hope mixed with surprise. "Your people. You help, without understanding. This is why I came." She struggled to sit up, wincing in pain. Jake noticed what appeared to be burn marks along her left arm, though they looked unlike any injury he'd ever seen. The wound seemed to pulse with a faint light. "My escape pod was damaged during my flight from the deep cities," Lyra explained. "I came to warn your governments, but I fear I may be too late. The Void Empire has found Earth, and they intend to drain your oceans and eliminate all surface life." Jake's skepticism warred with his instincts. Everything about this situation screamed impossible, yet the evidence floated right in front of him. Her injuries were real, her fear was genuine, and the readings on his equipment suggested things were happening beneath the waves that defied explanation. "Void Empire?" Jake asked, helping her find a more comfortable position. A species that consumes worlds, Lyra replied, her voice growing stronger. They have destroyed countless civilizations across the galaxy. My people have hidden from them for millennia in our underwater cities, but now they've discovered Earth through our energy emissions. She looked directly into Jake's eyes, and he felt the weight of absolute sincerity in her gaze. They will be here within days. Your surface military cannot stand against them alone. That's why I risked everything to come here, to forge an alliance between our peoples. Jake glanced at his radio, then back at Lyra. His grandfather had always told him that the ocean held mysteries beyond human understanding, and that a wise man listened when those mysteries chose to reveal themselves. Well then, Princess, Jake said, making a decision that would change both their worlds, I guess we'd better get you to someone who can do something about it. The Sea Runner cut through the waves toward the mainland. As Lyra shared the incredible history her people had kept hidden for centuries, Jake found himself captivated not just by her story, but by the way she told it, with a mixture of wonder and sorrow that spoke of someone who had grown up between two worlds. Your species fascinates us, Lyra explained, her injuries already showing signs of remarkable healing. We Nereids have watched humanity for over 2,000 years, since your ancestors first built boats capable of deep-sea exploration. Our cities exist in underwater trenches and caverns throughout Earth's oceans. Jake shook his head in amazement. And nobody ever suspected. Your people sometimes catch glimpses, stories of mermaids, sea monsters, mysterious lights in the deep. We've been careful to remain legends. Lyra's expression grew pained. Perhaps too careful. My father, King Theron, believes surface dwellers are too primitive and violent to be trusted with knowledge of our existence. But you don't agree. Lyra was quiet for a moment, watching the coastline grow larger ahead of them. 3 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected the Void Empire's scout fleet entering your solar system. They're unlike anything your science fiction has imagined. A species that evolved in the vacuum between stars, feeding on planetary resources and eliminating indigenous life forms. She turned to face Jake directly, her luminous eyes reflecting the sunlight. They've destroyed 47 worlds in this galactic sector alone. Each time they follow the same pattern: infiltrate, study, then strike with overwhelming force. They drain the oceans first. Water is the most valuable resource in the galaxy, then harvest all other materials before moving on. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. How long do we have? Their main fleet will arrive in 5 days, maybe 6 if we're fortunate. Lyra's voice carried the weight of certainty. I brought intelligence data stolen from our military archives, detailed information about their technology, tactics, and weaknesses. My people could help defend Earth, but King Theron refuses to risk our cities for surface dwellers. So you came alone? I came because I've spent years studying human behavior through our observation posts. Your species possesses something mine, has lost over centuries of hiding, the willingness to risk everything for strangers, to fight impossible odds for principles rather than survival. Lyra smiled sadly. We call it the surface madness, but I've come to understand it's actually your greatest strength. Jake thought about his grandfather, who'd spent 3 days in a life raft searching for survivors after a merchant vessel went down in a storm. He thought about the Coast Guard crews who risked their lives daily for people they'd never met. Maybe she had a point. Your father doesn't see it that way? My father sees humans as chaotic and destructive. He points to your wars, your pollution, your tendency toward violence. He believes the Void Empire's arrival is simply natural selection at work. Lyra's fists clenched. But he doesn't see what I see, humans like you, who pull strangers from the water without hesitation. The radio crackled to life with a weather report, and Jake realized how surreal this conversation had become. Here he was, discussing galactic warfare with an underwater princess while heading home from what was supposed to be a routine fishing trip. My escape wasn't exactly subtle, Lyra continued. I took a fast attack vessel from the Royal Fleet and fought my way through Nereid patrol boats. The damage you see is from their energy weapons. She gestured to her healing wounds. I was trying to reach your capital city when my engines failed. Washington's a long way from here. Maybe we should start with the local Coast Guard station, Lyra nodded, though she looked troubled. Your military leaders will need to see proof. The intelligence data I carry is encoded in Nereid biotechnology. It will seem like fantasy to most humans. But not to all of them. There are individuals among your people who will understand. Scientists, military strategists, those who think beyond conventional limitations. Lyra studied Jake's weathered face. People like you who trust their instincts over their preconceptions. Jake adjusted course slightly, heading for the Coast Guard station at Point Reyes. What makes you think I'm anything special? I'm just a fisherman. Just a fisherman who pulled an alien princess from the ocean and believed her story about galactic invasion, Lyra replied with a gentle smile. Your surface madness, Jake Riley, may be exactly what both our peoples need. As they approached the harbor, Jake noticed several boats heading out to sea despite the early hour. He recognized most of them, fishing vessels like his own, operated by men and women who'd spent their lives reading the ocean's moods. They looked agitated, their boats moving with unusual urgency. That's odd, Jake muttered, reaching for his radio. This is Sea Runner calling Harbor Master. What's got everyone spooked out there? The response crackled through static. Jake, that you? Coast Guard's been getting reports all morning about strange lights underwater, some kind of electrical disturbance affecting navigation equipment. They're advising all vessels to maintain safe distance from the deep channels. Jake and Lyra exchanged glances. Her expression had grown grim. It's starting, she said quietly. The Void Empire sends advanced scouts to map ocean currents and identify strategic positions. They're already here. The Point Reyes Coast Guard station buzzed with controlled chaos as Jake and Lyra arrived. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Wells, a no-nonsense officer with 20 years of service, listened to their story with the patience of someone accustomed to dealing with everything from drunk boaters to suspected smugglers. Let me understand this correctly, Wells said, leaning back in her chair. You're claiming to be an underwater princess, warning us about an alien invasion that will begin in the next few days. I know how it sounds, Jake began, but Lyra raised her hand. Commander Wells, what has your coastal monitoring equipment been recording over the past 12 hours? Wells frowned. Unusual electromagnetic disturbances, some kind of sonar interference affecting navigation systems. We've had reports from fishing vessels about strange lights underwater. Those are Void Empire reconnaissance drones, mapping your ocean floor, Lyra said calmly. They're identifying optimal positions for their harvesting equipment. Even if I believed you, Wells replied, I'd need evidence before I could report this up the chain of command. Lyra nodded and reached into what Jake had assumed was a pocket in her suit. Instead, she pressed her palm against her chest, and the material seemed to respond, opening to reveal a compartment that definitely hadn't been there before. She withdrew a device that looked like crystallized water filled with swirling lights. This contains complete intelligence data on Void Empire fleet composition, tactics, and technology, Lyra explained. It also holds detailed information about my people's defensive capabilities. Wells examined the device skeptically. It looks like a fancy paperweight. May I demonstrate? Lyra asked. At Wells' cautious nod, Lyra held the device and spoke several words in a language that sounded like flowing water mixed with wind chimes. The crystal began to glow, and suddenly the air above it shimmered with three-dimensional images. Jake watched in amazement as holographic displays showed star maps, technical schematics, and what could only be described as battle plans. The detail was incredible. He could see individual ships in massive fleets, weapon systems that defied his understanding of physics, and tactical formations that involved hundreds of vessels. These are the 47 worlds the Void Empire has destroyed, Lyra said, manipulating the display with graceful gestures. Each time they follow the same pattern. The hologram shifted to show a blue-green planet, not unlike Earth. Jake watched, in horror as dark ships descended from space. Massive drilling platforms emerged from the ocean floor, and the planet's water began to disappear into collection vessels the size of cities. The process takes approximately 72 hours, Lyra continued. First, they neutralize orbital defenses and establish control of the electromagnetic spectrum. Then they deploy harvesting equipment while eliminating any organized resistance. Wells, stared at the display, her skepticism clearly wavering. "This technology, and it's not from Earth." "No," Lyra agreed, "and neither is this." She turned to Jake, who had been unusually quiet since the demonstration began. "You mentioned earlier that you've had back problems from years of fishing. May I?" Jake nodded, not sure what to expect. Lyra placed her hand gently on his lower back, and he felt a warm, tingling sensation spread through the area where he'd been dealing with chronic pain for the past 5 years. The relief was immediate and complete. "My God," Jake whispered, moving without pain for the first time in years. "How did you—" "Bioregenerative technology," Lyra explained. "My people have developed medical capabilities far beyond your current science, but the point I'm trying to make is different." She looked directly at Wells. "Your species regularly risks their lives to save complete strangers. Mine has the technology to help, but we hide in fear while others suffer." Wells stood up abruptly. "I need to make some calls. This is way above my pay grade." As the commander stepped outside to use her secure radio, Jake turned to Lyra. "Do you really think they'll believe us?" "Some will. Others won't until the first ships appear in your skies." Lyra's expression was troubled. "The problem is that by then it may be too late for an organized response." "What do you mean?" "The Void Empire doesn't fight fair battles. They strike at infrastructure first: power grids, communication networks, transportation systems. Within hours of their arrival, your governments will lose the ability to coordinate a defense." Jake thought about all the fishing boats he'd seen heading out that morning, their crews sensing something wrong, but not understanding what. "What about people like us, regular folks who won't wait for official orders?" Lyra's eyes lit up with something that looked like hope. "That's exactly what I'm counting on. Your surface madness, the human tendency to act on principle rather than wait for permission. That could be the key to survival." Wells returned, her face grim. "I've contacted Regional Command. They're sending a specialist team to evaluate your evidence. Should be here within the hour." "What kind of specialists?" Jake asked. "The kind that deal with unusual situations," Wells replied diplomatically. "Let's just say if this is real, they're the people who would need to know about it." Through the station's windows, Jake could see more Coast Guard vessels heading out to investigate the underwater disturbances. In the distance, civilian boats continued their exodus from the deep-water fishing grounds, their captains trusting instincts honed by decades of experience. "Commander," Lyra said quietly, "when your specialists arrive, they're going to want to take me to a secure facility for questioning. That will be a mistake." "Why?" "Because while they're trying to verify my story through official channels, the invasion will begin, and once it starts, your communication systems will be among the first casualties." Lyra looked out at the boats on the horizon. The people who can make a difference are already out there, sensing that something's wrong. They're the ones we need to reach. Jake felt a familiar sensation in his gut, the same instinct that had warned him about dangerous weather patterns and told him when to trust unusual readings on his equipment. Something big was coming, and waiting for official approval wasn't going to save anyone. "What do you need us to do?" he asked. Lyra smiled, and for the first time since he'd pulled her from the water, she looked genuinely hopeful. "Help me reach the people who won't hesitate to fight for their home." The invasion began at dawn on the 4th day, exactly as Lyra had predicted. Jake woke to the sound of his radio crackling with panicked transmissions from ships at sea. Emergency broadcasts reported massive objects rising from the ocean depths along the entire Pacific coast, while news stations struggled to explain the electromagnetic pulse that had knocked out satellite communications across half the continent. "Jake!" Lyra's voice called from the main cabin of his boat, where she'd been monitoring Nereid communication frequencies. "They're here." He rushed to join her, finding her hunched over a device that projected holographic displays of the battle unfolding beneath the waves. Void Empire ships, sleek and predatory, rose from the deep ocean trenches where they'd been hiding. Their dark hulls seemed to absorb light, making them appear like moving wounds in the water. "Where are your people?" Jake asked, watching the tactical display with growing dread. "Still hiding," Lyra replied bitterly. "My father has sealed the deep cities and ordered all Nereid forces to maintain defensive positions. He believes the Void Empire will ignore us if we don't interfere. Will they? No. Once they've harvested Earth's surface resources, they'll hunt down every technological civilization they can find. My people are simply delaying their extinction by a few months. The radio crackled with a transmission from the Coast Guard. All civilian vessels, this is an emergency broadcast. Massive, unidentified objects have emerged from the ocean. Do not approach. Repeat, do not approach. Return to port immediately. Jake looked out at the horizon, where dark shapes were rising from the water like nightmarish islands. Military aircraft screamed overhead, but their weapons seemed to have no effect on the alien vessels. Energy shields flickered around the void. Empire ships deflecting missiles and cannon fire with casual ease. Our military isn't making a dent, Jake observed. The Void Empire has fought thousands of wars across the galaxy. They've seen every conventional tactic your species might attempt. Lyra manipulated her display, showing the alien battle formations. But they've never encountered anything like human unpredictability. What do you mean? Look at your fishing fleet. Jake grabbed his binoculars and scanned the ocean. To his amazement, instead of fleeing toward shore, dozens of civilian boats were moving toward the alien vessels. Fishing boats, pleasure craft, even a few Coast Guard cutters were forming an impromptu flotilla. They're not running, Jake whispered. Your people don't know how to run from a fight, especially when it's in their backyard, Lyra said with admiration. This is what my father doesn't understand about humans. Jake's radio came to life with familiar voices, fishermen he'd known for years coordinating their approach to the alien ships. Tom Morrison from the Seahawk was organizing groups by boat size and speed. Maria Santos from Lucky Strike was relaying information about weak points she'd observed in the alien formations. This is insane, Jake muttered, but he was already starting his engines. This is human, Lyra corrected, and it might be our only chance. As the Sea Runner joined the civilian fleet, Lyra worked frantically with her communication device. I'm trying to contact moderate factions within the Nereid military. Some of them disagree with my father's isolationist policy. Any luck? Commander Reef of the Deep Current Fleet is listening. He has 20 attack vessels positioned near the Monterey Canyon, but he won't act without direct evidence that humans are worth saving. Jake thought about that as they approached the nearest Void Empire ship. It was massive, easily the size of an aircraft carrier, but completely alien in design. Its hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and strange protrusions that might have been weapons tracked the approaching civilian vessels. Then let's give him that evidence, Jake said, reaching for his radio. All boats. This is Jake. Riley on Sea Runner. I know this looks impossible, but we've got something they don't expect. What's that, Jake? Tom Morrison's voice crackled through the static. We know these waters better than they do, and we're too stubborn to know when we're beaten. What followed was the most unconventional naval battle in human history. The civilian fleet used their intimate knowledge of local currents, underwater, topography, and weather patterns to harass the much larger alien vessels. Fishing boats darted between the massive ships, using their superior maneuverability to avoid energy weapons while targeting what appeared to be sensor arrays and communication equipment. The Void Empire had never faced opponents who attacked without a central command structure, who made tactical decisions based on individual initiative rather than coordinated strategy. Their sophisticated targeting systems, designed to track military formations, struggled to predict the chaotic movements of boats operated by people who'd spent decades reading wind and water. It's working, Lyra exclaimed, monitoring the alien communications. Their tactical computers can't process this level of apparent randomness. They're starting to make errors. Jake watched as the Lucky Strike successfully damaged what looked like a sensor dome on one of the smaller alien vessels. The ship's energy shields flickered and failed, exposing vital systems to follow-up attacks. Lyra, can your people see this? Commander, Reef is watching. He's impressed. She paused, listening to transmissions from the deep cities. Jake, 3 more Nereid commanders are requesting permission to surface. They want to help. What about your father? Still refusing, but Lyra's expression grew determined. I'm still a princess of the realm. I have the authority to grant temporary asylum to humans in Nereid territory. What does that mean? It means I can invite your fleet to take shelter in our underwater installations, and if the Void Empire follows them there, she smiled fiercely. Well, then they'd be attacking Nereid territory directly. Jake grinned, understanding immediately. Forcing your people to fight whether they want to or not. Exactly. Sometimes even an underwater princess has to bend the rules to do what's right. As if summoned by their conversation, massive explosions erupted from the ocean floor around. The alien ships. Sleek Nereid vessels rose from the depths, their bioluminescent hulls gleaming like living jewels as they engaged the Void Empire fleet. The tide of battle was beginning to turn, but Jake knew this was only the beginning. The real test would come when the main alien fleet arrived, bringing numbers that would dwarf the current engagement. How long before their reinforcements get here? He asked. Lyra checked her intelligence data. 18 hours, maybe less if they detected our resistance. Jake looked out at the combined human and Nereid forces fighting together against impossible odds, and made a decision that would define the rest of his life. Then, we'd better make every minute count. The battle raged for 16 hours before the main Void Empire fleet arrived, and in that time, Jake Riley discovered that humans and Nereids made surprisingly effective allies. Commander Reef's decision to join the fight had triggered a cascade of defections from King Theron's isolationist policy. By midday, nearly half the Nereid fleet had surfaced to engage the alien invaders, their advanced weapons systems proving devastatingly effective against Void Empire technology. Your people are remarkable strategists, Lyra told Jake as they coordinated the civilian fleet from aboard a captured Nereid command vessel. Commander Reef says he's never seen tactical improvisation like this. Jake watched the tactical display showing their combined forces. Human fishing boats served as scouts and harassment units, using their small size and local knowledge to identify weaknesses in alien formations. The Nereid military provided heavy firepower and advanced technology, while Coast Guard vessels acted as communication relays between the two fleets. We're making it up as we go along, Jake admitted, but that seems to be working. The Void Empire's artificial intelligence systems are designed to counter known military doctrines. They've studied the tactics of 47 conquered worlds. But none of those civilizations fought like this. Lyra manipulated the display to show alien communication intercepts. Their command structure is becoming increasingly confused by your fleet's behavior. Tom Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. Jake, we've got movement on the horizon, big movement. Jake grabbed his binoculars and felt his heart sink. The main Void Empire fleet was arriving, hundreds of ships of various sizes, from fast attack vessels to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in Earth's navies. The ocean itself seemed to darken as their energy fields interfered with natural light. Commander Reef, Lyra spoke into her communication device. Are you seeing this? The Nereid officer's response came through clearly. Princess, my fleet cannot stand against numbers like these. We've lost 30% of our surface vessels already. What about the deep cities? Can't your father send reinforcements? A pause. Then, King Theron has ordered all remaining forces to defend the homeland. He considers our surface operations a lost cause. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. So he's just going to let Earth burn. My father believes that by remaining hidden, our civilization might survive even if yours doesn't, Lyra said quietly. He's not entirely wrong from a purely strategic standpoint, but he's wrong about everything that matters, Jake replied. He reached for his radio, switching to the frequency used by the civilian fleet. All boats, this is Jake Riley. I'm not going to lie to you, we're about to be outnumbered by something like 50 to 1. Static filled the channel for a moment, before Tom Morrison responded. So what else is new? Remember the storm of '98 when we had 40 boats searching for survivors from that cruise ship? Didn't look good then either. The difference is this time we're not just fighting for people we know, Maria Santos chimed in. We're fighting for everyone. One by one, the civilian captains checked in, confirming their intention to stand and fight, despite the overwhelming odds. Jake felt pride swell in his chest. These people understood what King Theron didn't. Sometimes the right thing to do was also the dangerous thing to do. Commander Reef, Jake said, I have an idea. but it's going to require precise coordination. Between our fleets, I'm listening. The Void Empire expects us to retreat or cluster together for defense. What if we do the opposite? Spread out across the entire engagement zone and attack their supply lines instead of their main fleet? Lyra looked intrigued. Explain. Jake pointed to the tactical display. These big ships need support vessels, fuel, ammunition, repairs. Back home we call it a logistics tail. If we can cut it off, the main fleet becomes isolated and vulnerable, Commander Reef finished. It's unconventional. Unconventional is what we do best, Jake replied. What followed was a desperate game of three-dimensional chess played across hundreds of square miles of ocean. Human vessels, working in small groups, targeted Void Empire supply ships, while Nereid forces provided cover and heavy fire support. The alien fleet, expecting a traditional defensive battle, found itself dealing with attacks coming from multiple directions simultaneously. The strategy worked better than anyone had dared hope. Within 3 hours, the Void Empire's logistics network was in chaos. Massive dreadnoughts found themselves without ammunition for their primary weapons. Fast attack vessels ran low on fuel and were forced to withdraw from combat. "Jake," Lyra said excitedly, "my communication equipment is picking up signals from the deep cities. Other Nereid commanders are requesting permission to join the surface fleet. And my father is reconsidering his position." The tactical display suddenly showed new contacts rising from the deep ocean trenches. Dozens of Nereid vessels emerged from hidden bases, their bioluminescent hulls creating an underwater aurora as they ascended to join the battle. But the most significant arrival came from the deepest trench of all. A single vessel rose from the abyssal depths, its massive form dwarfing even the largest Void Empire ships. Its hull bore the royal insignia of the Nereid throne. "That's the Deep Current," Lyra whispered. "My father's flagship." King Theron's voice filled the communication channel, speaking in the liquid tones of the Nereid language before switching to accented English. "Surface Fleet, this is King Theron of the Deep Cities. My daughter has shown me that courage is not measured by the odds one faces, but by the willingness to stand with those who need you." Jake watched in amazement as the royal fleet engaged the Void Empire's main battle group. Advanced Nereid weapons systems, kept in reserve for millennia, proved devastating against alien technology. Energy beams that could cut through mountains, carved through enemy hulls like paper. "Your Majesty," Jake said into his radio, "this is Jake Riley, captain of the Sea Runner. Thank you for coming." "Captain Riley," the king replied, "it is I who should thank you. You saved my daughter's life, and in doing so you may have saved both our peoples. How can the Nereid realm assist in this final push?" Jake looked out at the combined fleets, human fishing boats working alongside alien royalty, civilian vessels coordinating with advanced military units, surface dwellers and underwater dwellers united by a common cause. "Just follow our lead, Your Majesty," Jake said with a grin. "We're about to show these invaders what happens when you threaten Earth's oceans." The final battle began at dawn on the 7th day, as the combined human Nereid fleet converged on the Void Empire's remaining stronghold, a massive command ship that had taken position directly above the deepest part of the Monterey Canyon. "That's their flagship," Lyra explained, studying the intelligence data displayed on the captured Nereid command console. "If we can destroy it, their entire fleet will lose central coordination." Jake nodded, but his attention was focused on the tactical situation developing around them. The Void Empire had learned from their earlier defeats, adapting their strategy to counter the unconventional alliance they faced. Their remaining ships had formed tight defensive formations around the flagship, creating overlapping fields of fire that made direct assault nearly impossible. "Commander Reef," Jake called over the communication system, "what's your assessment?" "Their defensive pattern is nearly perfect," the Nereid officer replied. "A frontal assault would cost us most of our remaining ships, and there's no guarantee we could penetrate their inner perimeter." King Theron's voice joined the conversation. "My fleet's heavy weapons could breach their shields, but not without significant losses. We would need a distraction, something to draw their attention away from the main attack." Jake studied the tactical display, his fisherman's instincts working on a problem that seemed purely military. But the ocean didn't recognize the difference. Between fishing and warfare, both required patience, strategy, and the ability to read currents both seen and unseen. "I'll be the distraction," Jake said suddenly. "Absolutely not," Lyra responded immediately. "Jake, that's suicide." "Not if I do it right." Jake pointed to the display showing ocean current patterns around the canyon. "Look at the water flow here. There's a thermal layer about 200 feet down that creates a natural blind spot in their sensor grid. If I can get close enough in something small and fast, the Sea Runner would be vaporized before you got within 10 miles of that ship." Commander Reef protested. "Not the Sea Runner," Jake replied, turning to Lyra. "I need one of your people's fastest attack vessels, something with stealth capabilities and enough firepower to make them think it's a real threat." King Theron's image appeared on the communication screen, his regal features showing concern. "Captain Riley, what you're proposing is completely insane," Jake finished, "which is exactly why it might work. Your Majesty, the Void Empire has been studying military tactics for thousands of years, but they've never seen anything like human stubbornness mixed with Nereid technology." Lyra was quiet for a long moment, running calculations on her tactical display. "There is one vessel that might work. The Deep Strike. It's a prototype stealth interceptor designed for reconnaissance missions. Fast, nearly invisible to most. Sensor arrays and equipped with experimental weapons systems. But Jake sensed there was more, but it's never been tested in actual combat. The control systems are only partially compatible with human physiology, and the weapon targeting requires neural interface technology that could be problematic for your species." "Problematic how?" "The mental strain could cause permanent neurological damage," King Theron said bluntly. "Or death." Jake looked out at the combined fleet, fishing boats and royal vessels, Coast Guard cutters and advanced alien technology, all united in defense of their shared home. Tom Morrison waved from the deck of the Seahawk, while Maria Santos coordinated supply runs between human and Nereid vessels. These people had trusted him to lead them this far. "Set it up," Jake said. "Jake, no." Lyra's voice carried a pain that went beyond tactical concerns. "I won't lose you to save a world that wouldn't even know your name." "Princess," Jake said gently. "That's exactly why it's worth saving." 2 hours later, Jake found himself in the pilot seat of the most advanced vessel he'd ever seen. The Deep Strike was beautiful in the way that Predators were beautiful, sleek, efficient, and obviously deadly. Its hull seemed to shift and flow like living water, and the control systems responded to his thoughts as much as his hands. "Neural interfaces synchronized," Lyra's voice came through the communication system. She was monitoring his vital signs from the command vessel, her worry evident in every word. "Jake, remember, you don't have to destroy their flagship. You just need to create enough chaos for the main fleet to punch through their defenses." "Understood," Jake replied, though privately he had already decided that half measures wouldn't be enough. The Void Empire had to be convinced that Earth would never stop fighting, never surrender, never accept defeat. Sometimes the only way to send that message was through overwhelming, impossible victory. The Deep Strike descended into the thermal layer, its stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible to conventional sensors. Jake felt the neural interface, connecting more deeply with his consciousness, providing tactical information directly to his brain. It was disorienting but also exhilarating. He could sense enemy positions, weapon ranges, and structural weak points as clearly as he'd once read weather patterns. "Approaching the perimeter," Jake reported. "Their defensive grid has gaps. They're not expecting an attack from below." "That's because no sane military commander would attempt it." Commander Reef's voice carried grudging admiration. "Captain Riley, you're either the bravest human I've ever encountered or the most foolhardy. Probably both." Jake guided the interceptor through the defensive perimeter, using the canyon's complex underwater topography to mask his approach. The Void Empire's massive flagship loomed ahead, its dark hull bristling with weapons that could vaporize continents. Up close, he could see the alien ship's true size. It was less a vessel than a floating city, housing thousands of crew members and enough firepower to sterilize planetary surfaces. "Target acquired," Jake reported. "Beginning attack run." What happened next would be remembered in both human and Nereid history as the most audacious single-ship assault ever attempted. Jake used the Deep Strike's advanced weapons to target not the flagship's heavily armored hull, but the sensor arrays and communication equipment that coordinated the entire Void Empire fleet. The neural interface allowed him to process tactical information at superhuman speeds, identifying weak points and firing solutions faster than any conventional pilot could manage. Experimental Nerid weapons systems, powered by his desperate determination, carved through alien defenses with devastating precision. Impossible, came a transmission from the Void Empire flagship, their artificial intelligence finally speaking directly to him. You are one small vessel against our entire fleet. Mathematical analysis indicates zero probability of success. Then your math's wrong, Jake replied, destroying another sensor cluster. You forgot to factor in human spite. The massive ship began to turn, bringing its main batteries to bear on his position. Jake realized he had only seconds before the flagship's firepower would overwhelm even the Deep Strike's defenses. That's when King Theron's fleet struck. The entire Nereid Royal Navy, led by the Deep Current, emerged from the canyon's depths in perfect formation. Advanced energy weapons, some of which hadn't been fired in 1,000 years, tore through the confused Void Empire defensive line. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before found their shields failing under the sustained assault of weapons that drew power from the ocean itself. All vessels, this is King Theron, the royal voice carried across all communication channels. Today we fight not as separate peoples, but as guardians of our shared world. Let the galaxy know that Earth's defenders do not yield. Jake watched the battle unfold around him, the neural interface allowing him to perceive the tactical situation with perfect clarity. The Void Empire's command structure was collapsing as their flagship struggled to coordinate a defense against attacks coming from multiple directions simultaneously. But even as victory seemed within reach, Jake realized the alien commanders had one final card to play. Energy readings from the flagship's core indicated they were preparing to trigger a massive detonation. If they couldn't have Earth's oceans, they would make sure no one else could either. All ships, emergency withdrawal. Jake broadcast. They're going to... The Deep Strike's neural interface flooded Jake's consciousness with tactical data. As the Void Empire flagship began its self-destruct sequence, he had perhaps 30 seconds before the detonation would create a shockwave powerful enough to destroy every ship within a 50-mile radius, including the combined human and Nereid fleets that had fought so hard to reach this moment. Jake! Lyra's voice crackled through the communication system. The energy readings, they're going to take everyone with them. Jake's fisherman instincts, honed by decades of reading dangerous waters, provided the answer. The flagship sat directly above the deepest part of the Monterey Canyon, where the ocean floor dropped away into abyssal depths. If he could somehow channel the explosion downward instead of outward. Princess, Jake said quietly, I need you to understand something. Your people have technology that can heal, can build, can explore the galaxy. Humans, we're really good at two things: adapting to impossible situations and making sacrifices for people we care about. Jake, whatever you're thinking, tell your father that some surface dwellers know how to make the hard choices too. Jake disengaged the Deep Strike safety protocols and dove directly toward the flagship's hull. The neural interface screamed, warnings about structural stress and system overloads, but he pushed the advanced vessel beyond its design limits. The alien ship's automated defenses fired desperately, but he was too close and moving too fast for their targeting systems to track. At the last second, Jake activated the interceptor's experimental energy core and set it to overload. The Deep Strike struck the flagship's hull just as both vessels' power systems reached critical failure. The explosion that followed was visible from orbit, but instead of expanding outward to destroy the combined fleets, the blast was channeled downward, into the canyon by Jake's sacrifice. The Deep Strike's overloading core had created a temporary energy field that directed the flagship's destruction into the ocean depths, where the massive pressures contained and absorbed the detonation. When the light faded and the shockwaves subsided, the Void Empire flagship was gone. So was Jake Riley. All vessels report status, King Theron's voice broke the stunned silence that followed. One by one, the ships of both fleets confirmed they had survived. The explosion that should have killed them all had been contained by one man's impossible plan and unthinkable courage. Princess Lyra, Commander Reef's voice was quiet with respect. Your human friend just saved both our civilizations. Lyra stared at the empty water where Jake had been, her luminous eyes bright with tears. He saved more than that. He showed us what we could become. The aftermath of the battle became the foundation for a new age of cooperation between humanity and the Nereid people. King Theron, profoundly moved by Jake's sacrifice, opened formal diplomatic relations with Earth's governments. Nereid technology began to appear in human cities, healing centers that could cure previously incurable diseases, water purification systems that could restore damaged ecosystems, and energy sources that drew power from the ocean's natural currents. But perhaps more importantly, the alliance changed both peoples in ways that went beyond technology. Humans learned patience and environmental stewardship from their underwater neighbors, while the Nereids rediscovered the courage to engage with the wider galaxy. Together, they began exploring beyond Earth's solar system, carrying Jake's message to the stars, that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the odds. Princess Lyra established the Riley Institute, a joint research facility dedicated to developing technologies that could defend other worlds from the Void Empire's expansion. She never married, dedicating her long life to ensuring that Jake's sacrifice would protect not just Earth, but every inhabited world the Alliance could reach. Tom Morrison and Maria Santos became the first human captains to command joint human-Nereid vessels, leading exploration missions to distant star systems. The civilian fishing fleet that had stood against impossible odds became the core of Earth's new interstellar navy, their practical approach to problem-solving proving invaluable in encounters with alien civilizations. Commander Reef, promoted to admiral after the battle, often told young Nereid officers about the day he learned that courage wasn't about having advanced technology or superior numbers. It was about making the choice to stand up when standing up was the right thing to do, even when, especially when, the outcome seemed hopeless. King Theron lived for another 2 centuries, long enough to see the human-Nereid alliance grow into a galactic federation that protected dozens of worlds from various threats. In his final years, he would often visit the memorial built above the Monterey Canyon, where a simple plaque honored the fisherman who had changed the course of galactic history. The plaque read, "Jacob Riley, he cast his net wide enough to catch 2 worlds." But perhaps the most fitting tribute came from an unexpected source. 50 years after the battle, long-range sensors detected a transmission from the edge of the galaxy. It was a message from surviving Void Empire forces, broadcast on all frequencies. Warning to all vessels. The system designated Earth is under the protection of beings who value principle over survival. They cannot be reasoned with, bribed, or intimidated. They will sacrifice everything for strangers. They will fight impossible odds for abstract concepts like justice and freedom. Recommend extreme caution or complete avoidance. Lyra, now an elderly ambassador but still sharp as the day Jake had pulled her from the ocean, smiled when she heard the transmission. "Jake," she whispered to the stars, "I think they finally understand." In the depths of the Pacific, where thermal vents fed the great Nereid cities, children of both species learned the story of the fisherman who had saved 2 worlds. They learned that heroism wasn't about having special powers or advanced technology. It was about recognizing when something mattered more than your own safety, and having the courage to act on that recognition. And in small harbors around the world, old fishermen still told the story of Jake Riley to anyone who would listen, usually ending with the same observation: the ocean's a big place, full of mysteries we don't understand. But sometimes when the tide's just right and the need is great enough, those mysteries choose to trust us with something important. When that happens, you don't let them down. You just don't. The alliance between humanity and the Nereid people grew stronger with each passing year, built on the foundation of one impossible day when a simple fisherman proved that the most powerful force in the galaxy wasn't advanced technology or superior numbers, It was the willingness to sacrifice everything for the people you love, including people you'd never met. Jake Riley had cast his net wide indeed, and the catch had been nothing less than the future itself.